Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Good morning, I'm Larry Fedoruk, in once again for Mike Farwell. As you've probably guessed, Mike is on the road with the Rangers, on the road with the team, and as we've been telling you, the game night tonight is 6:30. The pregame starts on 570 News Radio with Mike and Paul. They're, of course, Sault Ste. Marie, so they're playing the boys named Sue. They're in the suit tonight again, 6:30. So you'll hear Mike on all the Rangers games. In the meantime, on these long road trips, I get to fill in for Mike. So barring any unforeseen circumstances, I'll be here all week. Welcome to a wintry day here in paradise. Although, may I say right off the top, Kung Hei Fat Choi, which is a nice greeting because it's so-called Chinese New Year, or also known as the Lunar Solar New Year. And in the Chinese calendar, it's a celebration of spring. So maybe kind of hold that thought as we go through another winter day here in Kitchener-Waterloo in Cambridge. It's a celebration of spring. So it's Happy New Year in that particular culture. And it's the year of the snake this year. So they have 12 animals in their zodiac and their signs. So the year of the snake affects particularly people born in 1941, and it's every 12 years. So 53, 65, 77, 89, 2001, 2013, 2025. So if that's your birth year, this is your year, the year of the snake, once again, as I said, every 12 years. And if you're thinking snake, like, oh, year of the snake, that's got to be bad. No, there's positives to all of the animals, although I'm not deep into the culture of it, but I like to read up on it, and I like to kind of know, especially when it comes around, when it's actually the New Year's Day. Year of the snake this year, snakes are considered, among other things, like little dragons almost. So they're quite powerful in that regard. Then snakes also represent the pursuit of wealth and wisdom. And it's funny because lately in culture, we seem to see either one or the other, especially in America. The wealthy people don't seem that wise. But anyway, I didn't want to get political there. Not yet. We'll do that later. But so it's the pursuit of wealth and wisdom in the Chinese culture, and also the pursuit of love as a path to happiness, which is kind of makes sense, I guess, right? When you're in love, you're happy. So that's the representation of this year of the snake, and the Chinese greeting is Kung Hei Fat Choi. Happy New Year. It's today, and it's a festival that goes for a while, so that's always fun. And speaking of festivals related to a culture, I've been watching some of the footage. I don't know if you've seen it anywhere or seen pictures in the last couple of days, because it's been going on for a couple of weeks, and it's a longer festival. It's a few weeks long, and I hope I'm saying this right. I think it's Kumbh Mela. Kumbh Mela, I think that's how it's pronounced. It's a Hindu festival, and it's where the faithful go to the Ganges River to bathe in the river, and in some cases, the icy waters of the Ganges, as a way of washing away sins, among other things. And it's kind of they don't use the term baptism, but it's kind of another baptism. People of all ages do this. And the reason I bring it up is, it's going on, and it's a huge Hindu festival. And I don't know what I'd like to know. I couldn't find this, but if you're not, you don't have access, if you're a Hindu in Canada and you're not getting to the Ganges, can you do something else symbolically to do that, or does it have to be the Ganges? I think it has to be the Ganges in this case for the true sacrament of the religion, because so many people go there. And the reason I bring it up is some of this footage over the weeks, 400 million people make their way. Isn't that incredible? 400 million people, sometimes to these various cities and towns and places along the way. And at some points, up to 100 million people at a time. And you see these drone or aerial shots of this, and it's stunning the number of people that are kind of peacefully marching, if you will, to partake in a very important part of their belief system, the Hindu belief system in this particular case. So I was watching that and I was like, wow, that's incredible. And you think about it too from a practical sense, because you look at it and you go, wow, first of all, the Ganges is not necessarily known as a clean body of water at this point. Why would 400 million people over the weeks and days, why would they go into this water? And there was one young Hindu gentleman, he's about 20, and very fluent in English as well. And he's like, I want to be a scientist. He was into earth sciences. He goes, I'm religious, but I worry about the cleanliness of the water. So I was glad to see somebody from the culture kind of addressing the big issue is, why would you go in that water? Oh, but regardless of your religious belief, it's like, yes, man, they don't necessarily take care of that body of water. So he said, you know what, they've done a pretty good job of keeping away some of at least the obvious pollutants. And he said, I'm going to go in. He said, but I'm not going to stay in that long, So his religious belief was kind of balanced with his belief in science as well. But that's going on right now too, in the world. This is also, of course, day one of our 29-day election campaign in Ontario. Although one might argue that the politicians were in campaign mode for the last couple of weeks, even a month ago, when we started to hear talk of Doug Ford wanting to call an early election, and everybody kind of got into campaign mode. But officially, it's day one of the campaign, which we're also going to talk about on the show today. Actually, I have a pretty good lineup today that I'm excited to be a part of here today on 570 News Radio. I'll tell you what's coming up on the show in just a moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell today and this week. And you may have seen on our 570 News Radio webpage the story about some jobs coming to Cambridge as BWXT, BWX Technologies, getting a new contract and expanding and adding about 300 jobs eventually in their nuclear development plant. And what they do is they make steam generators, make components that will go eventually to Darlington to help that plant operate, but the components will be made in Cambridge. And I think last year, if you remember, at BWX Technologies, they announced an expansion of the facility. I don't know if that was in anticipation or in knowledge of a contract that was coming up with the government of Ontario or not. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. But they did announce their expansion, physical expansion, last year, which is still going on. They're still working on that facility. And that is partly now because to accommodate 200 jobs, I think, really quickly, and then eventually in the next few months, another 100 jobs of engineers and that kind of thing to work on these steam generators. And they have a new bit of technology that I'm excited to talk about. I'm hoping we understand that the BWX Tech individual who's going to join us is kind of part of the blowing snow and traffic problems that are beset upon us today. But hopefully he can make it to a phone and chat with us in our next half hour. We're going to hopefully talk with BWX Technologies about all these new jobs coming to Cambridge. That is good news. That is for sure. Also coming up this morning after 10 o'clock, we're going to talk about car insurance and home insurance. Both have seen double-digit increases, I think around 10, 11% in both sectors, home and auto, over the last little while. Why is that? Well, inflation, yes, but why else is insurance rates and premiums going up? And what can we do to save some money in that particular area? So we're going to be joined by not only a licensed insurance broker, but an insurance expert. Daniel Ivins is going to join us after 10 o'clock this morning. Stick around for that conversation as to how to save some money on insurance. We're going to be talking about that. Also in the 10 o'clock hour, a little bit after 10:30, we're going to be joined by a cardiologist from St. Mary's General Hospital, and we're going to talk about safe shoveling, shovel safe, or shovel smart, I think is the initiative. But it's winter. Well, today is evident, and we've had some pretty good snows this year. Pretty good winter as winters go, I guess, if you like winter weather. And they have this 5 S's kind of program to talk about shoveling smart and staying safe and avoiding a winter heart attack. Like, a heart attack is terrible in any season, but also February coming up. Everybody's talking about February 1st and 25% tariffs that Donald Trump looks like he's marching ahead. As you've been hearing on our news this morning, Melanie Jolie is in Washington today meeting with Marco Rubio and others, still trying to negotiate a way around tariffs, or at least across the board tariffs for Canadian goods, which I want to get into later, because I've really kind of got into the whole subject a little deeper lately, and it's interesting. I don't know that this is the smartest move that a president of the United States could make. I mean, people have been saying this. Americans going to suffer too, so we'll see. But nevertheless, we're talking so much about these tariffs on February 1st. We're forgetting that February, traditionally, for the last number of decades in this country, has been Black Heritage Month. And we're going to be joined by a representative of the Guelph Black Heritage Society. They're from their board. Kara Lewis is going to join us after 11 o'clock. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the events coming up in February to celebrate Black Heritage Month in the region. And also this morning, we will talk the Ontario election. There is, you just heard on 570 News Radio, there's kind of a split in Ontario right now as to whether people believe that this is a good idea at this particular moment. The next election was actually due as a fixed calendar election was June of 2026. So we're some 15 months ahead of schedule. I don't know. I really don't know what Ford's people are telling him, that this is a good idea at this time. Well, I mean, I have an idea. They're telling him, listen, you're ahead in the polls. Although the lead seems to be going down. I don't know if it's going down enough to give anybody else a chance, but you're ahead in the polls. I guess they're telling him, why don't you make the move now? It seems kind of odd to make this move to, you already have a majority government. What you're basically doing is grabbing an extra 15 months of power, if you will, or 15 months of governing for you and your party. I don't know why. I just don't know why now. I really don't. I mean, the tariffs don't seem like the proper excuse, if you will. So we can talk about that this morning in a number of ways, but also in our 11:30 half hour, Mark Winfield is going to join us. He's a professor at York University in environmental and urban change, and we're going to talk about whether this is a good idea or not, an Ontario election, an early election. As we all know by now, the date February 27th, when we'll be going to the polls. And I hope we do. I hope there's a great voter turnout at the very least. Whatever happens, I hope a lot of Ontarians turn out for this. That's what's coming up today. That and more on 570 News Radio. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Back in a moment. You can hear Mike tonight, part of the Rangers broadcast, pregame at 6:30. The Rangers in the Sioux tonight. In the meantime, Larry Fedoruk in on the Mike Farwell Show for today. Another thing to watch today, A couple of Senate hearings to verify a couple of Trump nominees for his cabinet. The one that's getting a lot of the headlines because of his profile is RFK Jr. for health. It's incredible. When you look at some of the Trump picks, Hegstaff or Noem or even Patel, and you may not agree, or you do, I don't know, you do or disagree, but at least in those particular areas, those people had some experience in the area to which they were appointed. You know, Patel, some experience in sort of security policing and intelligence agencies. Whether you like him or not, it's like, well, he's had some Hegstaff in military. But RFK Jr. in health, it's ridiculous. He is so unqualified. His cousin Caroline Kennedy released a video today just ranting about how unqualified he is, called him a predator, said he is just not a good person, you know. This is your family. Said, no, not that guy. Please don't pick that guy. So he's got his verification hearing today. And that one, as I said, because it's RFK Jr., is getting a lot of publicity here. But really the one we should be watching here in Canada is Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick will probably be rubber stamped as Secretary of Commerce. He is a Wall Street billionaire, I guess part of this new Trump oligarchy that he's putting together in the States. But he is a billionaire, and he is also a big fan of tariffs. And obviously, in some cases, I want to say it doesn't matter because Trump wants tariffs, so he's obviously going to pick someone who agrees with him on tariffs and put that person in there. I don't see, there might be a problem with RFK Jr., actually. I mean, he may not get the votes, but Lutnick will, and that'll just, you know, that looming deadline of Saturday, that February 1st deadline of 25% tariffs on Canadian goods is right there. And today, with this verification hearing, Howard Lutnick will be Secretary of Commerce and just begin the tariff rollout, I guess. So that's one we really should be watching as well. The idea that Doug Ford needs a new mandate to help battle Trump and the tariffs, as in, is Doug Ford running against Stiles and Crombie and Schreiner, or is he running against Donald Trump? That we're going to discuss later on in the show. Next on the program, the new jobs coming to Cambridge with BWX Technologies. We'll talk about that when we return. It's Larry Fedoruk on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Speaking of the snow, coming up in our next hour, we're going to talk about shoveling smart. We're going to have a cardiologist on, and we're going to talk about some basic things you can do to avoid the winter heart attack. I mean, it's one of the first things we always talk about here now in Canada when the snow falls is careful out there shoveling. You know, for a lot of people who don't get a lot of exercise, but suddenly they're doing a lot of heavy lifting. So a cardiologist coming up in the program to talk about shoveling smart. That's next hour. Also next hour, how to save on home and auto insurance, which partly due to inflation has gone up double digits over the last year in both home and auto. And we'll have an insurance specialist on to talk about that, and also how you can save some money on home and auto insurance. That's next hour. Good news is some new jobs coming to Cambridge. The province has signed a nuclear expansion contract for new jobs in Cambridge, and that was with BWXT. Our guest is President of Commercial Operations at BWX Technologies. John McQuarrie is joining us. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Larry.
I understand you got through some winter weather today to get to the phone in time.
Yeah, it was a bit of a challenging drive this morning, like we're all experiencing, so I'm glad I made it safely. For sure, yes, and thank you for that. This is great news. I know that at BWT Technology or BWX Technologies, they said announced expansion last year. Was that kind of in anticipation of some new deals, or was that unrelated? No, it was related. Yeah, we are fortunate to be able to see the demand coming, and so we are expanding to meet, what in part what we announced yesterday, which was about $1 billion in contracts for the type of products that we manufacture for nuclear power plants here in the province, but also we export around the world.
Well, I want to ask about that, but first of all, the products, a lot of them are steam generators. Is that going to be the main focus of this new deal?
Yeah, so what we announced yesterday was that as part of the life extension of the Pickering nuclear plant, they are replacing a number of the components and equipment at that facility, and key components are the steam generators. This is where the steam is created that then powers the turbine and generates electricity. And so that's what we do here. We design and manufacture these very large components, and we're pleased to be able to have a contract for 48 of those steam generators for Pickering. So that's a majority of what was announced the other day.
A steam generator, how big a thing would that be? Would it fit at the back of an 18-wheeler? Is it bigger, smaller?
It's a bit bigger than that, yeah. So in the case of these particular ones, they're different depending on the type of nuclear plant. But for Pickering, you can think of these as very heavy components that are difficult to ship by road, but they can be. Typically, we're shipping them on a rail car and then special transport vehicles to get them to these plant sites.
Wow, that's incredible. That's and so many of them over the next little while. So are those mainly the jobs, the manufacturing jobs, or will there be other jobs involved, engineering and what have you?
Yeah, there's other jobs. So there's a significant number of skilled worker jobs, but there's also engineering, there's project managers, there's all the support staff that you need in terms of accounting and whatnot. So to support this kind of work, so it's a mix of all of those.
Are those jobs, they're new jobs, but are they at this point filled already in anticipation, or are you still kind of saying, hey, if you're qualified, give us a call?
We are hiring, Larry. Yeah, so we're actually looking for steel workers, and these are skilled welders, fitters, machinists, non-destructive testing type skills. So absolutely are looking for more staff to join us.
Now, in reading this, I only found out about this SMR, the small modular reactor technology. Can you talk about that? Because my understanding is in Ontario, we'll be among the first in the G7 nations to be building using this technology.
That's right. Yeah. So the types of nuclear plants that we have right now in Ontario are a bit larger than a small modular reactor. And the way that's defined is that anything that's 300 megawatts or less is a small modular reactor, and anything bigger is a conventional plant. The appeal of these is that because they're smaller, they can be more assembled in a factory. So that's helpful when you think about the challenges with building trades in all parts of Canada and North America. They're a little bit less costly. They can be online a little bit faster, and so that's the appeal of those. And yeah, OPG has decided to deploy this technology at their Darlington site, and they're working through that. And one of the things that we announced yesterday is there's a very significant piece of equipment, a component that houses the core of the reactor, and we've got the contract to do the detailed design of that component and manufacture it here in Cambridge. Wow,
that's amazing, and to be that cutting edge world leader in that, I think that's terrific. That's terrific. You mentioned that you deal with a lot of how many different countries you said you export to?
We've been exporting into any place where the Canadian reactors have been deployed to. So there's a number of countries around the world, and then we've been exporting to the United States as well for the types of products we make, like steam generators, for quite a long time.
So what do you feel about tariffs? Would they apply? Assume if they're across the board tariffs, they would apply to BWX Technologies.
Yeah, it's of course difficult to say exactly what's going to happen. We're watching that issue. It's top of mind, like it is for all of us. But at this point, what we announced the other day is all Canadian work, right, between ourselves and our Canadian customers. So that's not so important to those contracts, and we're not exporting a great deal to the U.S. at this point in time. But obviously, yeah, we're watching that very carefully to see how that will unfold and how it might impact us in the future.
So obviously you have many baskets with many eggs in many baskets instead of so United States would affect your business, but you've got a lot of other things going on, including these Canadian jobs here.
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing here in Ontario, where about 50 to 60% of the electricity comes from nuclear power, is we're extending the life of these, both at Ontario Power Generation, but at Bruce Power as well. And so that's creating significant, demand for companies like ours, and is creating, a tremendous number of jobs. So we're pretty fortunate, that we've got this supply chain that is largely Ontario-based and that is serving these, Ontario customers and ultimately delivering electricity to Ontarians. And so I think it's a great, situation for us where we have some energy independence and create a lot of great jobs, so good economic benefit from all of that.
Certainly is, and congratulations on the new deal, and I thank you for your time today. Thank you, John.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to talk to you.
You as well. John Macquarie is President of Commercial Operations at BWXT Technologies, announcing that deal yesterday, the province signing a nuclear expansion deal with BWXT Technologies, meaning about 300 new jobs in Cambridge. And as you heard, they are now hiring. More in a moment. This is 570 News Radio.
What we're doing here in Ontario, where about 50 to 60% of the electricity comes from nuclear power, is we're extending the life of these, both at Ontario Power Generation, but at Bruce Power as well. And so that's creating significant, demand for companies like ours, and is creating, a tremendous number of jobs. So we're pretty fortunate, that we've got this supply chain that is largely Ontario-based and that is serving these, Ontario customers and ultimately delivering electricity to Ontarians. And so I think it's a great, situation for us where we have some energy independence and create a lot of great jobs, so good economic benefit from all of that.
Yeah, it really is a positive story all around. That was John Macquarie. He's with BWX Technologies, and he is their commercial operations president. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. John Macquarie and I talking moments ago about the announcement, yesterday I guess was the main announcement, but kind of been rumored of this a while, that the province was going to sign a nuclear expansion deal with BWXT that would include them manufacturing components for Ontario nuclear plants. And, with John, we talked about what a lot of people are talking about is companies that deal with the United States, Canadian companies, and the anticipation of the dreaded tariffs coming Saturday, and on what across the board, I guess. I don't know what can be negotiated last minute. Nothing. I'm not sure. But anyway, as John pointed out, they do some export to the United States, but also many other countries. And in this particular deal, this is Ontario based company in Cambridge, and making components for Pickering, and putting them on Ontario trucks or Ontario trains and moving them across the highways and railways there. And so it's and that's the new jobs, or Canadian Ontario jobs. So it's cool. And as you said, as he said, rather, it's engineers, it's steel workers. They're looking for welders, a lot in the manufacturing area itself, but they're also, when you expand like that, there'll be some accounting jobs and management jobs. What else you're looking at? All kinds of things that are related with a company expanding. So that's good news. Good news for the region with all those new jobs. And nuclear power too. It is, for the most part, clean energy. We've certainly learned a lot and come a long way when it comes to nuclear energy. And when we talk about the amount of energy that, for example, Ontario consumes, it's just incredible. I mean, that's why it's so hard to wean us off fossil fuels, because of the amount of energy the world consumes in highly populated areas like Southern Ontario consume so much power that you need a variety of sources. And nuclear is like, what did John Macquarie say? 50%? I think that's right. I think 50% of the power that we take for granted the power that enables me to be talking to you right now, for example, right? And to stay warm on this wintry day. That's all, 50% of that coming from nuclear. Here's Matt. Matt, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Okay, you got to be kidding me that this is a taxpayer fleecing of the country. So let me bring this into a perspective.
Okay.
On a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, they have a nuclear reactor that is rated for 50 years and can power 5,000 people indefinitely. And when it's done, they pull it out and they bury it. And you're good to go. Now, on an aircraft carrier, you need, everything for the combat and all the people. But for you and I, that would power 10,000 homes in the city. And when it's done, you just pull it out. There's zero contamination. Why are we building something from the ground up when it's already made?
Hold on. What are we building from the ground up?
This small nuclear reactor modulars out of Cambridge and in Canada. These nuclear reactors that power Navy ships are already built, tried, tested, right. True technology. And when they're done, you slide them out. There's zero contamination. These guys are going to put in a minor Pickering or a minor Darlington someplace that you can't use the land ever again.
Aren't we building new components? We're not building something from the ground up. We're building new components for existing plants. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, and this is where the bureaucracy always goes wrong, and they want a small nuclear reactor to power the northern cities. This technology is off the shelf and already made. Why are we doing this from the ground up?
Well, Matt, okay, thank you. I appreciate the call. I don't understand. I understand that bureaucracy gets in the way and that government is rife with bureaucracy, and I don't disagree with those points. I just don't know if that's happening here. I honestly don't know, because the understanding is we need these steam generators wear out, or they don't last forever. So we need to continue to supply the nuclear power. We need some new generators. We need a new widget. We need a new bolt here. We need a new doorknob there. Somebody's got to make those things to keep the I don't get this ground up thing that we're not doing ground up stuff. As a matter of fact, we have some new technology that is available, and that is this small modular reactor, the SMR technology, that is really new. That other G7 countries wish they had. We're among the first in the G7 to be using these in Ontario. That's new technology, and that's what we're making. That's what they are making in Cambridge, at least according to how I read this particular story. I'm not a scientist, but this is what I'm getting out of. And I understand that what Matt's talking about, these nuclear ships too, because I've just heard about them recently, how they're basically powered for and the nuclear subs. They're just powered for life, man. They just go underwater and they can live there for 50 years if they choose. It's pretty incredible how they applied the nuclear power to military. Anyway, more in a moment on 570 News Radio. Be right back. Larry Fedoruk and Mike Farwell. If you're just joining us, we've been talking a little energy over the last little while, nuclear energy. And the province signing a new deal with Cambridge company BWXT Technologies to make some new components for nuclear power plants in Ontario. And sort of the conversation about power, 50% approximately, according to John McCory of BWXT Technologies, 50% of Ontario's power right now comes from nuclear. Once they figure out fusion, it's interesting if you watch the stories on fusion. I don't pretend to understand it, but right now nuclear power is basically fission. It's how it works. But fusion is this whole other, that's fusion. They figured it out, but it took so much power to create the fusion that it's like, okay, we've created the fusion power to run an electric can opener for 5 minutes, but it took us, it took us all this other power. So but they wanted to know, and this only happened, I would say, in the last year or so, where they managed to create power out of through a fusion process. And once they figure out how to do that more efficiently, like fusion is power forever. I mean, we have power forever. I just, if only there was a big ball of fire energy in the sky that we could take power from that would last for millions of years. Oh, there is. Oh, but we just, practically can't apply solar to everything. We can't apply wind power to everything. For what lithium batteries are doing, I understand they're cleaner than fossil fuels, but it's just replacing one fuel with another and one form of drilling and mining with another. I really don't know this fascination with lithium batteries is the answer. It might be helpful for certain vehicles and phones or things that we use, but I don't know if it's the big energy answer. So anyway, it's an interesting topic. We can talk more about it if you like. Also, we're going to talk about insurance next hour. Car and home insurance gone up. How could we save money on that? That is coming up next with an insurance expert. When we return, the Mike Farwell Show. Larry Fedoruk with you in for Mike today on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Welcome to Hour 2 of our Wednesday show. Coming up in our next half hour, we're going to talk about shoveling smart with a cardiologist from St. Mary's General Hospital. That's coming up on the program in our next half hour. And that's what we're going to be talking about is basically their 5S program. What they have is it's called stretching, shifts, size, stop smoking, and signs as things to do to shovel smart, right? And avoid a winter heart attack. There's also the NK method, the neighbor kid, which I like to use, or I did like to use when I had to shovel snow. Now, living in apartment condo, it's all done. Somebody else takes care of it. It's always nice. But still, be aware and be shoveling smart. We're going to cover that with a cardiologist coming up after 10:30 this morning on the Mike Farwell Show. Now, insurance rates have gone up. Ontario Home and Car Insurance have seen double-digit rate increases over the past year. Why is that? And can we actually save any money somehow? Is there a way to avoid paying higher fees? Let's find out. Our guest is from rates.ca, an insurance expert, and also a licensed insurance broker. Daniel Ivins is joining us. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Larry. Happy to be here today.
Thanks for joining us today on this very important topic. I guess inflation is the easy answer as to why insurance rates have gone up by around 10 or 11% in both categories, home and auto. But how exactly does inflation affect insurance rates?
Yeah, if you want to look at what's had the biggest impact on insurance rates, say over the course of a long period of time, the last 50, 60 years, inflation naturally plays a big role there, where a home that you could have bought in the GTA in the 50s, 60s for $20,000 to $50,000, now in 2025, that's a $1.52 million home. That's a lot more expensive naturally. So as inflation increases, the cost of living increase and the cost of labor increase, and as costs increase, so do to the payouts as a result of claims, and as a result of that, in many cases, insurance companies have to take on additional premium to cover those additional losses that are incurred.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're fixing your car, for example, at the body shop, the parts probably cost more, and the labor probably costs more, and all of that.
Yeah, and we saw this back, especially in 2021, highlighted during COVID, where we saw a significant car parts shortage, which drove up the cost of used cars. And in general, as we see costs driving up, so too do we see premiums. But in addition to inflation naturally having an impact on rates, as it always has, we're seeing these extra items popping up that are having a really significant impact, most specifically climate change and vehicle thefts. So significant increases.
I'm glad you brought those two up because I wanted to ask you about that. Number one, climate change. We've certainly seen that. Climate change taking some of the blame, for example, in Los Angeles, where it's billions and billions of dollars in damage, and the claims go up. I don't know how I don't know how people keep up when it gets into the billions and billions worldwide.
Well, yeah, and in Canada, we're seeing billions and billions of dollars paid out. Back in 2020, the Insurance Institute of Canada had observed that we paid out the industry had paid out $2.1 billion in losses due to climate change. So we're talking about flooding, forest fires, hail damage, and they predicted that by 2030 that number would shoot up to about $5 billion. But alas, in 2024, last year, Canada-wide, we saw $8.5 billion paid out as a result of this. And with these big, sharp increases in cost and expenses, naturally, this also we see with insurance premiums as well to make up for those losses and to mitigate future losses as well.
And you mentioned car theft. That's another factor for auto insurance, but I guess the answer there is I'll just have to buy and insure an undesirable car. I almost feel like that's what I have to do to save money.
Well, buying and insuring an undesirable car may help you mitigate your vehicle being stolen, but it's not necessarily going to mitigate the overall impact to the industry en masse, where we're seeing significant spikes, especially particularly in the GTA, year over year increases in claims as a result of vehicle theft. This impacts all consumers.
So is there any way to save money here? Is there any way to, I say save money, but let's just say pay less or be able to get some better deals out there?
Well, yeah. I mean, naturally, discount maximization is going to be a starting point. The insurance industry has a lot of discounts tied into their products, most significantly bundling your home and auto together, bundling multiple autos inside of the household together, taking advantage of usage-based insurance where you download an app and demonstrate good driving behavior for additional discounts. These aren't pittance. These are very significant discounts, all in their own right, between 10 and 30% for each item. So finding a way to speak with a broker or an agent to make sure that you're taking advantage of every discount that an insurance company has filed is on that. It's a privatized. If you've been with the same company for 3, 4, 5 years, you may have missed opportunities to be with other companies that were offering lower rates. So shopping around every year is always going to be recommended as probably the best approach to saving money.
Okay, Daniel, you're breaking up a bit here and there, so I think we found a spot here. So don't move, so that we continue to get your words of advice here. You can bundle people, so to speak. In other words, if you've got family members at different companies, you get them together to one company. That can also save. Is that correct?
Correct. So bundling home and auto together, or if there are multiple cars in the house, we're talking spouses and children, making sure those vehicles are bundled in with the home insurance as well. It's a very significant discount, as well as making sure that all cars are insured with the same company. You'll see significant multi-vehicle discounts. But what we're seeing a lot lately, and one of the most impactful discounts out there, is usage-based discount, where if a consumer downloads an app and demonstrates good driving habits, they can see up to 30% off on their insurance premiums. And this is really the best way for consumers to take control of their premiums overall. Beyond that, I mentioned it's a privatized insurance industry in Ontario, and we have a lot of competitive markets competing with each other. So as a consumer, if you've been with the same company for 4, 5, 6 years, you may have missed some opportunities to be with companies that have taken on lower rates or are looking for your business. Shopping around annually, finding the provider that's offering the coverage that you need at the best price is always going to be recommended.
What's telemetrics? Is that for cars? I know people feel, that's it's somebody watching me, but it actually can save you on car insurance.
Yeah, usage-based insurance is in most cases an app that you can download or a dongle that you can plug in. And, I think society at large has demonstrated that they're happy to be monitored if they feel the value and what they're getting is justified. And not that they're being monitored per se, but every single app on your phone monitors you. And consumers are willing to download Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, that are obviously collecting data, and every app on an iPhone or on an Android is the same. They all monitor and track data, but the payoff here is significant discounting up to 10 and 30%.
And I wanted to ask you perhaps a silly question here. I don't know, but I just thought of it. When you're getting everybody in a household together, several vehicles on one company, to save some money. I can't sort of bundle my brother in Mississauga and my cousin in Ottawa, and you can't do that, can you?
It depends on the company. So again, another great reason to shop around. There are companies out there, for example, that do have family discount programs. But for the most part, most insurance companies to qualify for these discounts require the family to be in the same household.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay, rates.ca, people can find you and find some more ideas there. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Rates.ca, if you're a consumer and you see your premiums increasing year over year and you're not satisfied with the explanation, you can visit rates.ca and you'll have access to several different insurance companies and different providers. And basically what you're doing is really tapping into the market, comparing prices between companies for the same coverage and finding the best company out there for you that year. So every year I'd recommend visiting rates.ca or another aggregator to see if there's another provider out there that really wants to win your business and is able to offer lower premiums.
All right. Daniel Ivins, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. All the best.
Thanks for having me.
Daniel Ivins from rates.ca, insurance expert and licensed insurance broker. I learned a valuable lesson about insurance. I'll share that with you. It's an obvious one, but I just only learned it a few years ago. That's next when we return here on 570 News Radio.
The privatized insurance industry in Ontario, and we have a lot of competitive markets competing with each other. So as a consumer, if you've been with the same company for 4, 5, 6 years, you may have missed some opportunities to be with companies that have taken on lower rates or are looking for your business. Shopping around annually, finding the provider that's offering the coverage that you need at the best price is always going to be recommended.
That was our guest moments ago. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell, and that was Daniel Ivins, an insurance broker, also with rates.ca, an insurance expert. And we were addressing the issue of home and auto insurance going up by double digits, rates going up by double digits in the last year. It's around 10, 11% in both categories, home and auto. And it's crazy. And it's not just inflation. It is climate change. And I've got some problems with that as well, but I mean, save that for later if we have time. But the one thing I did learn that Daniel says, and any time I've approached this topic or talked about it on this show or others, is the same thing comes up. And I only learned this a few years ago. It seems obvious, but it's shop around. Really, I mean, you shop for a lot of things. You compare prices. You're in the grocery store and you pick up a jar of this and a jar of that, and it's basically the same, but this one's cheaper, and you put that in the cart. And we do a lot of comparative shopping, and sometimes I don't know that we do it when we're buying home and auto insurance. And the one thing, I'm not saying it always works, but the one thing about a competitive capitalist market is that's what it's supposed to do. This, and you're not going to get anything for dirt cheap or super cheap or free, obviously. But competitive markets are supposed to do that, where you can go to the competition to try and get a better deal and a better deal and a better deal. And I don't know if enough people do that with insurance. And I met a person. I've had this insurance company for a long time. And I met a person socially, and then we get to talk, and they're like, "Hey, I sell insurance. Could I pitch you on insurance?" And I'm like, stereotypically, that's kind of a nightmare. It's like, oh, I just sat next to an insurance agent, and he's going to try and sell me insurance. But I said, yeah, I mean, the guy's trying to make a living. I said, yeah, let's arrange a time. We can do it by the phone. He said, and he goes, I'll call you and we can go through your stuff and see what kind of rate I can give you for auto insurance. And we went through it, and his price was actually a little bit better than what I was paying. He said, by the way, do you have any traffic infraction, any speeding tickets? And I had just got one. And I'm not just saying this. I've had one speeding ticket in 25 years. And that's it. Not a speeder, don't really believe it saves me that much time. So anyway, he goes, ooh, that'll affect what I have to charge you. And I said, well, I reported the speeding ticket to my insurance company, but because I had been a long-time customer with that company and my record said otherwise, that I don't have speeding tickets, they forgave me the one ticket. And I don't know how many tickets they would have forgiven, whether it's one or two, but they forgave me that one. So therefore, by shopping, I knew that my current situation would actually worked out in the long run to be cheaper than the new situation. But I shopped, and I shopped. And that's what a broker does. That's why, you call a broker. And I had the same company for a long time. Broker called me one year and go, we're getting some pretty good deals here from insurance company XY. Why don't we look at them instead of your other one? And better deal. Shop around. Here's Kathy. Kathy, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Yeah, the info on Shop Around, very true. I did a household move, and I had been with the same insurance broker, same insurance company for decades. But when I moved, that wasn't feasible anymore, so I had to go looking. Well, I found out a few surprises on that one. I could definitely get it cheaper at different places, so that is definitely an issue. But another thing I encountered with this, when I set up with the new insurance company for the house, every 5 years, they come and do what they call a fire loss prevention inspection. And they come and they look at the house. They go through the whole thing. They are specifically looking for plumbing, electrical, and hazards around the home and the general condition of the property. And if you have any, fire situations that you need to address. And I don't know how many companies do this. I kind of forgot about it, but at the end of it, it was a bit of a pain. But I realized it was for my benefit. And I wonder how long it'll take more insurance companies to do that in the future.
That's a great point. Kathy, thanks for the call. That's a great call. Interesting that for example, when you see the big fires like in urban areas like LA recently, they talked about all the things people could do around their homes to lessen the chances of their home catching fire. So just doing that on a typical basis, even if you're not in the path of a Santa Ana winds in a dry area, there are things you can do to make your home more safe in that regard. That's a great point. Thanks for the call. Back with more in a moment here. This is 570 News Radio. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. We're talking insurance rates up for home and auto, how to save. Shop around is a good tip. Bundle, of course, is another one. My problem with insurance, and it's not necessarily a problem with home and auto insurance in Ontario, but I don't want to go there. When Ben Franklin or whoever invented insurance, I think it was Ben Franklin, at least part of it, sort of said, okay, guys, here's our deal. Why don't we all take some money every week and month and throw it in a pot and just keep it there. And one of us has a problem, then we got some money there to help out that guy. So anybody who puts money in is eligible to take some money out at some point if they have a problem. And then John Hancock stands up and goes, oh, by the way, lightning hit my fence post and I need a new fence now. And they're like, all right, John, we got some money in our insurance. And you got insurance. We'll fix that. So then the problem is after a while, and I don't know when it happened, but, all this money accumulated, and somebody said, we need $100 to give John Hancock for a new fence. And the guys taking care of the money went, yeah, but we had so much money in that pot there that we started investing the money and we started to lend out the money and manipulate the money to make more money. And if we give John Hancock his $100, we're going to have less money to make money. And I don't know, should we really? And when insurance became that's when I don't know when that happened, but it happened. So insurance company has become this huge financial organization that now it's not always in their best interest to give away the money that they're supposed to give out, when really they're not supposed to be a financial organization. They're supposed to be just a keeper, hold on to the money in case one of us needs it, right? You know me, I like to break things down to the real basics. Here was the idea of this, and here's how it's supposed to work, and why doesn't it work that way? So next time you have a problem getting a payout from your insurance company, think about that for a second. We got wintry days in Kitchener-Waterloo, and we're going to talk about that and how to shovel smart, how to stay healthy. Cardiologist from St. Mary's General Hospital coming up next here on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Saturday is Tariff Day, but Saturday is also February 1st, and February 1st marks the beginning of Black Heritage Month. And we're going to address that after 11 o'clock this morning, coming up in about half an hour. We're going to be joined by the Guelph Black Heritage Society. One of their board members is going to join us. We'll talk about some events that are coming up and the importance of looking at the heritage and the history of the culture in this country over the decades. And also next hour, we are going to talk a little bit more about this unnecessary election. Many people feel an unnecessary provincial election in Ontario. You're on day one of the official campaign. All that coming up in our 11 o'clock hour. Don't forget, noon till 1 every day here on the Mike Farwell Show is the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. We throw it all over to you, whatever you want to talk about. And there is so much to talk about just in the whole provincial election alone, but anything else that's on your mind, 12 o'clock Talkback Hour coming up for a whole hour from noon till 1. Right now, let's talk about shoveling smart. Shovel smart to prevent the winter heart attacks. And we are clearing the snow, whether it's sweeping it off the car or sweeping it off the steps or shoveling it down the sidewalk and driveway. Our guest is Dr. Jaffer Syed. He is a Joint Chief and Medical Director in Cardiology at St. Mary's General Hospital and joins us now. Hello, Dr. Syed.
Hi, good morning.
How are you today? Are you clearing snow? Have you had to clear snow today so far somewhere?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. I actually did clear my driveway this morning, but fortunately with a snowblower.
That sounds like a little less strain. What is the strain on the heart? Because you have to be careful when you're shoveling snow, but also it is exercise of a sort, which is good for the heart. So what's the strain? What are we looking at here?
So there are a few things. I mean, I think number one, when people tend to get out there and shovel snow, they just kind of get their coat on, get their outdoor gear on, and they just, dive right into it. There's a sudden, temperature change. The body goes from kind of being indoors to outdoors. And then, when you hit the cold, it does cause a little bit of constriction of the arteries in the body to begin with. And that sudden temperature change coupled with going from kind of 0 to 60 in terms of physical activity can often be quite stressful on the walls of the arteries of the heart. And if you've got normal arteries, then it's obviously much less of a concern. But the issue that arises is when people have pre-existing plaque buildup within their artery walls, within what we call the coronary arteries of the heart. And when there is this pre-existing plaque, which may not be a tight narrowing in the arteries, but just a mild plaque buildup, the sudden kind of surge in blood pressure that you get with the isometric exercise of lifting heavy snow can sometimes cause a tear in the plaque that's in the artery wall, and that tear causes a rupture of the surface of the plaque, kind of like a crack in the pavement, and then that induces clotting that rapidly occurs and can suddenly cause a heart attack out of kind of nowhere.
And people generally, I guess this is maybe another topic, but people generally aren't exercising enough. And this is maybe some of the first exercise they're getting in a while. So there is that as well. Yep,
indeed. I mean, the winter months, people are generally a little bit less active, but snow shoveling is kind of like a needs-based thing that, you only do it if you have to. And sometimes, the quality of the snow also is an important factor. I mean, when you have like light powdery stuff, it's a bit easier on the body than the heavier wet stuff. And the amount of weight that you kind of, lift with each shovel load is certainly directly proportional to the stress on the body.
Now, I was looking at the article about, preventing these winter heart attacks, and there was 5 main points, and I kind of called it the 5S model, which are, can we go through those? Because there's some good tips here before you, as you say, just kind of, what a lot of people do is just throw on the winter gear and rush out with, grab the shovel and go. There's things you should be doing and thinking about.
Absolutely. Like this form of exercise is, it's generally pretty isometric, meaning it's kind of like the equivalent of lifting weights or bench pressing and whatnot. But there also is an aerobic component to it, where once you kind of get going at a steady clip, you can consider it to be a bit aerobic. And aerobic is the better form of activity for preserving heart health. But by and large, I mean, the key thing with this type of exercise, if you're going to do things that suddenly surge the blood pressure, is you want to warm the body up. And so number one would be to just stretch your upper body, your chest, your back, your neck, and, just limber up a little bit. And, maybe even do some things that just kind of get your heart rate up, like the way sort of a runner would jump up and down a little bit, just to get the body going a little bit.
Also look at, if you have to clear a driveway manually, you don't have to do it all at once. Do shifts. Yeah.
I mean, so again, a lot of times, you're shoveling snow because you're in a bit of a hurry and you want to get to work. But again, you got to look at the depth of snow, the type of snow, if it's sort of the lighter stuff versus the heavier, and, restrict yourself to manageable loads. Every time you kind of go at it, you got to kind of figure out whether this is unduly strain on your body. And so, don't try to tackle the whole thing all at once, and maybe just take your time, take breaks.
Yeah. The shifts, the size of the job, maybe even the size of each shovel load. Stop smoking is an obvious one. Don't smoke. But what about signs? That's the last S, if you will. Signs. What are we looking for here? Is it signs that you may be in trouble or that you may be overexerting?
Absolutely. So, the typical symptoms would be a tightness or pressure across your chest. You might, have more of a breathlessness as opposed to a pain or tightness. It sometimes is not in the chest. It's more kind of the upper stomach area, kind of where the rib cage meets the stomach. And so that plus or minus kind of a little bit of shortness of breath are the main symptoms, but people sometimes also get a bit lightheaded or dizzy. Sometimes the symptoms cause a lot of undue sweating, and sometimes the tightness in the chest, travels from the chest over to the arms, and the fingers, and sometimes they can get a little bit numb. And the key thing is to recognize when, this kind of stuff is happening. And for some people, it's pretty immediate that they can tell that this is just not right. It's not the usual. And they just immediately stop and come in and, get some help. But for some people, it's a little more subtle, and they push on through it. And that's when you get into real trouble.
I only have a few seconds here, but I want you to address, if you could briefly, Doctor, the Prevent Clinic at St. Mary's General Hospital. What is that, the Prevent Clinic?
Yeah, so that's an exciting initiative that we launched, powered by Manulife with their support. It's really for people who don't have a family doctor or a nurse practitioner to manage them on the primary care side, and people who have a bunch of risk factors for cardiovascular disease who may have come into our ER. So it's a way of them getting connected in the community to a clinic that is dedicated to looking at their cardiovascular health. And so, it needs obviously a referral from the emergency department. But once they're in this system, they don't have to have a GP or nurse practitioner. They can directly access fairly specialized care.
That sounds amazing. All right. I hope people take advantage of that who need it. Dr. Syed, thank you for your time today. Shovel smart, shovel safe. All the best.
You bet. Thanks, sir. Have a good day.
You too. Dr. Jaffer Syed is Joint Chief and Medical Director in Cardiology at St. Mary's General Hospital. Hope you take all that to mind and keep it in mind when you clear snow today or anytime this winter or next. This is 570 News Radio.
The key thing is to recognize when, this kind of stuff is happening. And for some people, it's pretty immediate that they can tell that this is just not right. It's not the usual. And they just immediately stop and come in and, get some help. But for some people, it's a little more subtle, and they push on through it. And that's when you get into real trouble.
Shovel smart. That's the overall message. That's Dr. Jaffer Syed, Joint Chief and Medical Director of Cardiology at St. Mary's General Hospital, talking to us about the Shovel Smart program. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and for Mike Farwell today, and that was the 5 S's. Stretch. Before you shovel snow, stretch. You're doing an isometric exercise. Like, stretch out the arms of the back, do all your stretches. You'd be amazed how much a difference that makes. Also, shifts. You don't have to, shovel snow for 3 hours and do the driveway and your neighbor's sidewalk because you're trying to help out. Do shifts, the size of the job ahead of you and the size of the shovel loads and all that stuff. And that, sometimes the snow is heavier than it is other snowfalls. Don't smoke or stop smoking is the other S. And also signs, which Dr. Sad was referring to there. Look for that kind of the heaviness on the chest or the excessive sweating or the different signs that you might be having heart problems. I've just gone through this for November, December, because that's how long it took to get the specialists and all this kind of stuff. And this is probably TMI, but I'm going to go ahead anyway and tell you that I've had this aneurysm. It's called an aortal abdominal aneurysm, the AAA, I call it, for, I guess, a long time. I was diagnosed, 20 years ago, a long time ago. And it's funny, when I was diagnosed with it, I mentioned it to my mother at the time one time. I said, oh, by the way, I got this thing. It's not a big deal, but they have to monitor it every few years. She's like, oh, yeah, that's how your grandfather died. I was like, geez, that would have been handy to know earlier, A lot of these things, hereditary in the family. Although many of my family have also had strong hearts and lived old ages. My mom lived till she was 94. Nevertheless, so this is an aneurysm in aortal artery, and it's in more in the abdominal region, thus named. And you have to keep an eye on it. So I was due. So I had a scan. I had an ultrasound and then a CAT scan. And they go, yeah, you should probably see this specialist or whatever. The reason I bring it up with the shoveling snow thing was because the cardiologist that I saw said, yeah, it's safe. We don't usually operate or do it. It's fine. Like, we'll check it again in 6 months. But it's at a point where you should probably check it every 6 months. And I'm like, yeah, okay, thanks. And I'm like, what about the rest of it? I mean, I know I should probably eat healthier. And he said to me, this is what he said, which is great to hear. He goes, when it comes to your heart, it's one thing. When it comes to your aortic or this aneurysm, it's anything you do. It's not. He goes, do whatever you want. Go out and have sex and shovel snow. And I laughed because, and I guess he was trying to be funny, but he goes, yeah, go out and have sex, shovel snow. And I'm like, yep. Oddly, those are the top two things on my to-do list for the weekend. So thank you, doctor, for giving me permission. But for a doctor, cardiologist to have a sense of humor, I appreciated that. But also that those are the two strenuous things he picked that would be the top two for your heart to kind of watch out, man. How's your heart? Oh, you can have sex and shovel snow. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. I appreciate it. Anyway, I was actually going to share that with Dr. Syed, and I was like, nah, I won't actually bore him with that story. I'll bore you instead. There you go. But anyway, in all seriousness, shovel smart. Like I say, there's probably a healthy 12-year-old somewhere in your neighborhood who wouldn't mind making $10 or whatever the cost is now. What would be the cost of that? I don't know. So, shoveling smart is also just pay someone to do it if you can do that. But check out St. Mary's General Hospital, their Prevent Clinic, and also you'll find that article on the signs and the stretching and the shifts and all that in order to shovel smart. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. The heart goes on here on 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Mike on the road with the Rangers. You'll hear Mike along with Paul tonight starting at 6:30 of the pregame, and you'll hear the Rangers taking on the Sioux Greyhounds tonight. Tonight on this 4-game road trip. It's game 1 of the 4-game road trip for the Blue Shirts. So that's tonight at 6:30. In the meantime, coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, which I'm the custodian of for a couple of days here, we'll talk with a professor from York University about the what many are saying an unnecessary provincial election. I'm not getting it. There's something I'm not getting about calling an election because we have to fight the Trump tariffs. I just call an election for any other reason, I just think that's the flimsiest of excuses, and I can't believe that anybody's going to buy that. Whether he wins again or not, or before he gets another majority or not, I'm just not getting it. Maybe somebody could explain that to me, because it just seems to me like it's not a reason to call a provincial election at this point. Hey, is there just a little crack in the wall somewhere now federally where Jagmeet Singh was saying today that they might be willing to support liberal government initiatives for a fight against American tariffs once Parliament resumes on the 24th of March? Is that just a little crack of the door open that says we might not have an election until the fall in federally, that is? Because we are due for an election in the fall, but what we expect to happen, which likely will happen regardless of it's Carney or Freeland, I think it's got to be one of those two, right? Where they pick a leader, the parliament resumes, non-confidence motion, government collapses, they go to the governor general, they drop a writ, election in April or May. That's kind of what most people think is going to happen federally. But, you know, did Jagmeet Singh today leave the possibility open that they might support some kind of motion that the liberals may have and not bring down the government and then limp it through till summer recess and then a fall election? I don't know. One of the Doug Ford strategies, too, is he wants to get in ahead of a possible federal election. I'd be interested in exploring that idea, too, why he thinks that was so important to get a provincial election in before a federal election. I mean, it's not like the provincial election would have been right after the fall election and we would have had election fatigue, right? Because the provincial election was not until June of 2026, and the federal election would be this fall if it just played out as it, by the dates, by the actual dates that they had to be. So I don't know. There's interesting strategies for Doug Ford, none of which I really understand at this point. And then, of course, there's all the strategies that people believe, and like one of them being he just wants to take advantage of a lead in the polls right now, which those I kind of understand. I believe those more than the other ones. So that's for next hour. We're going to talk to a York University professor about that topic. Don't forget 12 o'clock, 12 to 1 is our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. It's all you on the phones. And coming up next when we return, Black Heritage Month. That is February, of course. We'll speak to someone from the Guelph Black Heritage Society about upcoming events when we're back on 570 News Radio. Welcome to another hour of the Mike Farwell Show. As I just mentioned moments ago, we'll talk more about the provincial election upcoming February 27th. It's officially day one of the campaign. Here we go. And as you've been hearing all the provincial leaders at various spots today getting out their messages, we'll talk more with Mark Winfield coming up. He's a professor at York University. That's coming up after 11:30 on the Mike Farwell Show. Right now on the program, February 1st will mark the beginning of Black Heritage Month, as we've been observing for decades here in this country. There's a lot of events coming up in the region during the month of February that you can learn more about the history and the heritage. Joining us to talk about that, a board member with the Guelph Black Heritage Society. Once again, Guelph Black Heritage Society. Kira Lewis is joining us. Good morning, Kira.
Good morning, Larry. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Digging out of the snow, but doing well.
As so many people. Well, shovel safe and shovel smart, as we've been saying all morning here. Kira, this is a Heritage Month. It's a month of history. How do you balance looking at the heritage and the history with kind of looking at the present and future, or do you try and do that?
Well, for 25 years, February has been referred to as Black History Month in Canada, following a motion introduced by the Honourable Jean Augustine, the first Black Canadian woman elected to Parliament. It's actually the month in which we celebrate the contributions that Black historical figures have made to our society. Names like Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and more recently.
Oh, we just lost the call there, so we'll try and get Kira Lewis back. I wonder if was she heading for Viola Desmond as well? I think she was going to mention her, Viola Desmond, on the $10 bill. Just a quick story. I was on the subway once, coming from the legislature of all things, for the Queen's Park legislature for reasons I won't get into. And I get on the subway, and as I'm walking on the subway, I see something on the seat. Car was fairly empty. And I was going to reach over and pick it up, and a woman walks up and picks it up and sits down and starts looking at it. And she goes, "What's this?" And I go, "You just found $10. She goes, "This is a 10?" And it was just when the new bills came out. And I went, "Yeah, that's a new $10 bill." And she goes, "Wow, this is somebody's money." And I go, "Well, I guess it's yours now." And she had not heard of and it was just a nice moment, because I had just heard about the bill, and I was able to impart the story to her about Viola Desmond and why she was on the 10. And it was just an exchange that I'll always remember. Just, kind of shared a story. She learned more. I was able to share something I had just learned. It was kind of and I thought Kara Lewis was kind of going to mention her too, as some of the names. Kara Lewis is back with us, board member with the Guelph Black Heritage Society. Kara, you were talking about some of the names
Yes.
of people that you're looking at when it comes to heritage.
Mm-hmm. And I do know, like Viola Desmond, yes, is one ingrained in our minds. Celebrating the past has always been the focal point of Black History Month. So these people like Viola Desmond, there are other people in Canada whose stories have not been heard. So we're really big on sharing the stories with the community and having people come into our space and share those stories. So, yeah.
No, it's interesting because Heritage Hall itself has quite a story when it comes to Black heritage as well, because it's Heritage Hall now, but it wasn't always. It was basically a white Methodist church at one point, was it not?
It was. It was established in 2011, and the mission of the Guelph Black Heritage Society is to basically restore and maintain Heritage Hall, originally known as the BME Church, the British Methodist Episcopal Church, which was built in 1880 by formerly enslaved Black individuals and their descendants who arrived in the area via the Underground Railroad. So it was more of a cultural, historical, and social community center serving to promote the Guelph and Wellington counties' distinctive plan in southwestern Ontario. Basically, it's Ontario's rich Black heritage, and it is present, so we just want to preserve that heritage and make sure that we are spreading the news.
When you say celebrate the heritage and inform people of the heritage, tell people about the stories and the individuals involved, not just for the Black community, though, right? For everyone. All
people, all walks of life. I believe sharing stories. I grew up in Guelph, so being a minority in Guelph myself was very interesting. Our home was open to everybody. We were able to, see all cultures and share food and stories of my parents' immigrant experience coming to Canada. And just, there's so many stories in this diverse community. It's very like a diverse community now. So it's very important to me sharing the stories of even growing up in this community.
Yeah, and I mean, in Canada, we have this idea, or we did for many years, I think, that we were separate from all the negativity that came out of, for example, the Black experience in the United States. Not always the case. And I mean, Viola Desmond is a story. It was a negative story that turned into a positive. I think there's probably more of those stories as well. Are there not?
There are, because there's a rich history in Nova Scotia as well. We do have some very important figures like Mama Susie, who is a relation to my children, actually, because they are half Métis. There's a rich history in Nova Scotia that needs to be celebrated as well. The story of Africville, which is a story of loss, and then, the resilience of the Black people. North Preston is a community that is the largest Black community in Canada. So there's a history here to be explored. And we didn't grow up learning this in school. We learned a lot about Jacques Cartier and Christopher Columbus. We were never told about, this rich history. So that's my goal, is just to kind of share that celebration of our history and celebrate the future as well. And that's why we call it Black Heritage Month, because we have so much to celebrate for the past. However, we're celebrating our ancestors and making them proud by moving forward with resilience.
I'm glad you made that point. History and heritage are often used interchangeably, but they do mean two different things. And
that's right.
And yeah, heritage is so important. I'm glad that change has been made. Can you? I've only got a little time here, but can you go through at least a couple of events that are coming up that people can maybe mark in a calendar or keep in mind?
For sure. Thanks, Larry. So the Guelph Black Heritage Society is going to be celebrating, like I said, our 5th annual Black Heritage Month in February 2025. This month, we're going to commemorate the past and present accomplishments within the Black community and set sights on our bright future ahead. While we will continue to acknowledge the resilience and bravery of those who came before us, we must recognize that Black history and experiences are much more than the narrative of enslavement. The GBHS calls on the community to honor our past, celebrate today, and look forward to the future. So the following events that we're going to be having this month will be first on February 15th, Saturday, February 15th. We'll be having 3 events for the month. Saturday, February 15th at 11 a.m., we'll be having Giselle Jones. She'll present a conversation of integrating mindfulness in the work of being Black. Saturday, and then those tickets can be bought on Eventbrite. Then we have, so Giselle's going to basically talk about exploring the additional and invisible labor of navigating the world being Black, but also the tremendous resilience and power born from both intergenerational and lived experience. She will invite and instruct how to embrace micro moments of mindfulness throughout the day. This is most accessible practice for those who are busy. So it's free admission, actually. Donations are welcome. And to register, please go to the Eventbrite page. We also have a tribute to Bob Marley featuring Dr. Mike and Friends. Saturday, February 22nd, 2025 at 7 p.m. That will be at Heritage Hall. Please join us as we celebrate the legend's 80th milestone, Earth Strong, at the Heritage Hall, 83 Essex Street in Guelph. The show starts at 7 p.m. The tickets are $20, and it's an all-ages event. So also to buy tickets, you'll go to our Eventbrite page. And then our last and final event will be the 4th Friday at Guelph Museums, Friday, February 28th, 2025. Come out and enjoy the soulful and uplifting musical performance featuring Verice Vassal-Bowen at the Guelph Museum, 52 Norfolk Street in Guelph. Show starts at 7 p.m., free admission. So for more information, you can email info@guelphblackheritage.ca.
All right. Sounds terrific. I'm glad we got those in as well. And it's going to be quite a month. Kara, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry, for having me.
Kara Lewis is a board member with the Guelph Black Heritage Society. That's what you have to Google or go to info@guelphblackheritage.ca and find out more about these events, or not more necessarily, but get the details on how to buy tickets that Kara just mentioned. This is 570 News Radio.
That's my goal, is just to kind of share that celebration of our history and celebrate the future as well. And that's why we call it Black Heritage Month, because we have so much to celebrate for the past. However, we're celebrating our ancestors and making them proud by moving forward with resilience.
Kara Lewis, board member with the Guelph Black Heritage Society. Our guest moments ago, I'm Larry Fedoruk, in for Mike Farwell. Black Heritage Month coming up starting Saturday. It's the month of February. And as you heard there, if you were listening, Kara Lewis outlined 3 major events that the Guelph Black Heritage Society is holding in February. You can go to their webpage and find out more about those particular events. including one, that tribute to Bob Marley, which will be, I mean, there'll be conversations and things, but that's more of a musical event. So a lot of great events coming up, not only entertaining, but informative, and you can find out more. And I'm glad, again, as I said to Kara, making the distinction rather, between heritage and history. Though we use them interchangeably, heritage is more accurate, more descriptive of what really the month is about, looking at the heritage, not just historical events and things. She mentioned some names. She mentioned, like, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. and Harriet Tubman. And I'm glad we talked about Viola Desmond, because Viola Desmond was, I hate to always do the American comparison, but kind of the American Rosa Parks, and happened even before that. Rosa Parks famously would not give up her seat on a bus as a black woman, that she was required to do at the time, and did not do it, and led to people boycotting the bus system, the Selma bus system, and Freedom Riders came out of that, and a lot of other things came out of that. Viola Desmond was in a theater in Nova Scotia, and was sat in the white people's section, I guess. Trying to remember the exact year. Nevertheless, was told to that she couldn't sit there. Refused. Was actually arrested. I believe when she was given the honor of being on the $10 bill in Canada, and it was not only a unique honor, but the $10 bill also, her image and the way the bill was presented was vertical instead of horizontal, right? I know none of us use bills anymore, and it's a shame, because it's a great honor to be on a Canadian money, but most of the bills are horizontal. Hers is vertical. I have one. I kept one that I just thought it was a great souvenir to have. And again, to repeat my story, I found one on a subway one day. I looked at it and I knew what it was, but just as I looked at it, a woman walked up and picked it up. So I guess she found it. And she didn't know what it was. She didn't believe it was real money because she didn't know the story. And I said, "You just found $10. And the other part of that story that I always like to tell is this woman looked like a professional, well-appointed woman in her 40s. She said, I was so enamored, because she said, "Oh, I have to return this. This is somebody's money. This is somebody's, maybe it's their supper money." And I'm like, well, you found cash on a subway. What are the chances that somebody's going to claim it's theirs? Like, She goes, "Sir, I turned it into lost and found." And I'm like, "I don't know how you do that." And again, money on the thing, like. And she goes, "But what do I do with it?" And I said, "Well, you can't pay it back. Why don't you pay it forward?" She'd never heard of pay it forward. And when Kara Lewis just talked there about looking at heritage, looking back, but looking forward, it made me think of that exchange I had on the subway that day with that woman and that Viola Desmond $10 bill. I said, "You pay it forward." She goes, "What does that mean?" I go, "Well, you give it to a person on the street, maybe that needs some money, or donate it to your favorite charity, whatever you want." And that's what paying it forward is. It's not always with money, but you pay forward. You pay deeds forward. You pay money forward. You do whatever you can. And I think that's kind of a great theme when you look at heritage of any kind, is how do we take whatever was done by individuals back through our history, and how do we bring that forward and pay it forward? Well, anyway, I was a little preachy there, wasn't I, for a second? I think I was. All right. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. This is 570 News Radio. Be right back. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Don't forget, Mike is traveling with the team. That's why he's not doing the show. When he's got those long road trips, I get to come in and be the custodian of his show for a few days. But you will hear Mike tonight on the Rangers game, 6:30 pregame here on 570 News Radio. They're playing in the Sioux. Mike and Paul tonight, as I said, starting at 6:30. Hey, do you know in this provincial election coming up February 27th, do you know that Mike Schreiner is the only non-blonde? Observation that's absolutely useless to anyone. Although sometimes I like to vote just based on hair color alone. So Speaking of elections, I mean, we have the provincial election. We will have a federal election this year. It depends. Is it going to be in April or May, or is it going to be in the fall? We don't know. As I mentioned yesterday, thank goodness the municipal elections aren't until the 2026, October of 2026. So we don't have to deal with that as well. Last year, 2024, was a world record, and my gosh, the number just left my head. I don't have it, but it's something like, it was absolutely, in the history of democracy, it was a record year for federal elections. Something like, I want to say it was over 80 nations had some sort of federal election for a president, a prime minister, a national parliament or government in last year. It was incredible. The biggest one, of course, the one that sucked up all the oxygen, was the United States, of course, but there was Mexico, there was the UK, France. That was a surprise one. Some of the big ones, I think Japan. It's just incredible. It's just incredible. And, to kind of look at democracies and the political leanings of world elections last year, it's worthwhile. It's a record year. So a lot of democracy, or at least alleged democracy, moving around last year, and now for us this year as well here in Canada. We're going to talk about that next, the provincial election, right after the news here on 570 News Radio. Between noon and 1, as we do every day, the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. I mean, whenever we have opportunities to take your calls, we do, but certainly in that hour, it's up to you, whatever you want to talk about, including day one of the Ontario provincial election campaign, day one of 29 campaign days. The election is on the 27th of February. Joining us to talk about this election, professor in environmental and urban change at York University, Mark Winfield, is with us. Good morning, Professor Winfield. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, good morning, Larry.
The logic that we've been pitched off the beginning was that Doug Ford needs a new mandate to help fight American tariffs put in by Donald Trump, I guess coming in Saturday. I'm not sure how an election strengthens our hand in this battle against tariffs or Trump. How do you see that?
Well, I'd be inclined to agree that an election at this point doesn't make a lot of sense. We're going to be in election campaign at really the most crucial moments in terms of whatever Trump is going to do next week and over the next month. That we're not only is there sort of a huge distraction in the sense that instead of focusing on being on the premier and on also being chair of the Council of the Federation, the premier is going to be tied up in an election campaign. And the opposition, he already holds a majority in the legislature. The opposition has been quite clear that they're willing to cooperate on responses to Trump. So I think a lot of people are asking the question, does this rationale really make sense in the circumstances? Is this the best possible response in the circumstances?
I mean, we kind of have the opposite of that federally, where Minister Joly and Minister LeBlanc said, we don't want to be involved in a campaign, in their case, for a leadership of their party, because we have a job to do.
Yeah.
Doug Ford is kind of saying the opposite.
Well, yeah, and I think there's all kinds of, there's sort of the obvious big problem of how do you run a election campaign while also paying attention to the being job of premier and also supposedly actually acting as chair of the Council of the Federation, coordinating with the other premiers in the federal government. And then we're also, as have been coming up, very practical problems that come out of this. The Liberals yesterday and today were highlighting all the constraints on the premier during the writ period, that he's not supposed to be traveling outside the province, he's not supposed to be running these advertising campaigns in favor of what his government is doing, because there are conventions during the election period that you don't do that. There is also the problem that the legislature itself is, as of yesterday, dissolved. And can't be recalled until after the election, which means at this stage early March. So if there was anything that required legislative action before then, be it legislation or major new spending, basically we can't do that while we're in the writ period of the actual election campaign, because there is no legislature to recall at this stage.
Is Doug Ford, as some have said, just trying to get an election ahead of, let's say, an RCMP investigation, a Greenbelt investigation, any other perceived or real skeletons in a closet? He's trying to get ahead of those instead of actually...
That's been the theory for some time. Indeed, there have been hints from Mr. Ford going all the way back to last spring that he was contemplating an early election call, and this was seen as part of the rationale for rushing the beer and wine into corner stores. Is now turning out at very, very considerable cost. There's been concerns that, yes, if although we don't know what's going to happen federally now, the numbers do seem to be shifting quite a bit, but if you were going to have he would rather run again with a Liberal government in Ottawa than a potentially Conservative one. And yes, there are potentially multiple chickens coming home to roost around things like the Greenbelt, around the underfunding of health care and education. Electricity costs are likely to start rising very significantly in the near future as well. So clearly Mr. Ford has been looking for some time for an excuse to get out ahead of all of these things, which could create a problem for him by the time we would have got to 2026, when we would normally be due a provincial election.
Now, I just want to pick up on something you said. I think you just said there that Doug Ford would rather run with a federal Liberal government, you said? Is that right?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, I think there's multiple reasons. One, of course, has been the unpopularity of the current Liberal government. So in a sense, it almost becomes, voting for Mr. Ford becomes a vote against what was still is technically the Trudeau government. So I think there's an element there. There is also a long history of Ontario voters voting what's something called a split ticket, that we vote one way provincially and the other way federally. And there's a long history of that going back through the entire post-war period. We tended to have governments of opposite parties federally and provincially. And I think he's worried that Mr. Poilievre may win the next federal election, and following that pattern, provincial voters in Ontario would be unlikely to vote Conservative provincially as well, or at least less likely. And even more so if Mr. Poilievre were to engage in a series of very unpopular budget cuts and things like that, I think the Ford government would worry about that sort of ricocheting back at them, because the first opportunity voters would have to vote then would probably be in a provincial election in Ontario, in which they might feel we don't want to vote Conservative.
I'll tell you one of the things I'm worried about, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is voter turnout. It was extremely low last time in June of 2022. Could it be even worse this time? Does that play to anybody's advantage, and possibly Doug Ford's advantage?
I think the thinking would be that low voter turnout is a risk. We had historically the lowest voter turnout in Ontario history in 2022. That was generally seen to help the Conservatives. So I think it's going to be an interesting question here. I mean, it creates all kinds of problems, because if you did the math, Mr. Ford's majority actually only rested on the votes of less than 18% of actual eligible voters in Ontario in 2022. It's generally thought low voter turnout would favor Mr. Ford. At this stage, it's an unknown, because it really depends a bit on how people feel about this. If they feel that the election call itself becomes the ballot question, the precedent in Ontario is, of course, what happened to David Peterson in 1990, when he called a very early election, and the voters didn't see a justification, and they didn't like the cost. And Mr. Peterson lost to Bob Rae in 1990. So that would be the other possibility. If people do become very engaged, there is a risk that it could run against the Conservatives quite significantly. So that is a consideration for certain.
It'll be interesting to see if Stiles and Crombie and even Schreiner can bring this back to these issues that they're already touting today: education and jobs and healthcare and things like that, as opposed to the tariff thing. But very interesting, Professor Winfield. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you very much. Good talking to you.
You as well. Mark Winfield is a professor of environmental and urban change at York University. More on this topic in a moment. This is 570 News Radio.
I think he's worried that Mr. Poilievre may win the next federal election, and following that pattern, provincial voters in Ontario would be unlikely to vote Conservative provincially. And even more so if Mr. Poilievre were to engage in a series of very unpopular budget cuts and things like that, them, because the first opportunity voters would have to vote, then would probably be in a provincial election in Ontario in which they might feel we don't want to vote Conservative.
Professor Mark Winfield, my guest moments ago. He's from New York University. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell, and we're talking about the provincial election campaign now underway officially today. And one of the points was that Professor Winfield was addressing there was one of the reasons Doug Ford would be calling this election now, seemingly in a bit of a hurry. Really what he's trying to do is get ahead of a federal election, get in ahead of a federal election. Why is that? Why would he prefer to do that? Why would he prefer to run with a federal liberal government? And that's what Professor Winfield was addressing here. Not only this historical trend in the province of Ontario, where we vote one way provincially and the other way federally, we just do the opposite. We always have this balance, conservative federal, liberal provincial, so on and so forth. Bob Ray being a little bit of an exception, but you could say that was a left vote. But nevertheless, I mean, that's happened a lot in Ontario. So if that's the trend, and there's liberals which are unpopular right now, and in some cases I'm just repeating what you just heard, but if the federal liberals are unpopular right now, then vote that great conservative vote, that Doug Ford conservative vote, vote it now, and Doug Ford gets back in. Whereas if there was a federal election, and as polls would indicate that Pierre Poilievre is there, suddenly we have a conservative federal government that may make some unpopular moves, and therefore we would continue our trend here in Ontario of voting liberal provincially and goodbye Dougie. So that's the strategy of getting in before a federal election. I guess that makes sense if you're a political strategist. I don't know what it does for us as individuals, as taxpayers, but as a political strategist, I guess that makes sense to them. I'm not sure. Here's Sean. Sean, go ahead. You're on the Mike Farwell show on 570 News Radio.
Hi. Yeah, I sort of agree with him. The federal Conservatives are probably going to be making some very unpopular cuts, and people do have a very bad habit of conflating federal and provincial politics, I've noticed. They blame one for the other, even though that may not necessarily be the case. So, yeah, I could see why Doug Ford might want to get out ahead of the federal election. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on a side note, you know that today is the Lunar New Year for the Chinese calendar?
I mentioned that off the beginning of the show this morning. Kung Hei Fat Choi.
And it's the Year of the Snake. Don't you think that's very appropriate?
I do. On face value, yes, I do. Thank you, Sean. I did mention that at the beginning of the show. The thing is about the snake, by the way, is the positive aspects of the snake is that they are perceived as little dragons within the culture, and they can be symbolizing the pursuit of wealth and wisdom. I'm not sure why exactly, because snakes are often also perceived as, not in the culture, but just in general, as sneaky and conniving and evil on, the devil side, the snake. But snakes in the lunar solar new year are the pursuit of wealth, wisdom, and the pursuit of happiness through love. So that's the positive aspect of the snake, Year of the Snake here in the lunar solar new year, or Chinese New Year, as we say here, and it's today. So happy New Year on that. But I think Sean's comment was more of the politics of the snakes in our political system, in North America these days. It seems that we have a few here and there. I know what it means. And if Doug Ford is playing politics, I don't have a problem with that on its own, because everybody plays the politics. It doesn't matter if you're a conservative or a liberal or further right or further left or somewhere in between. This is the game. This is the system, if you will, that we use. And the early hard definition of politics is the interaction of people. So we've developed a political system outside of politics where we look at trends and we look at strategies and we look at polls and ways to reach people for their and now what's come called identity politics, where you don't just vote for someone, it is what you are. It defines you by who you vote for and all these kinds of things. So with all that now, I understand that the game is played, and I don't mind that it's being played, or I'm not going to blame him for playing a game with it. It's just, let's all understand this and let's get to what is at hand here. And today already, Merritt Stiles and Bonnie Crombie and even Mike Schreiner are already talking about what it's going to cost Ontarians, what Doug Ford has done with the education system, with health care, the issues. So tariffs be damned. And Doug is going to respond to those as well. My wish is that that's what the election becomes about, is it becomes about jobs and healthcare and education and taxes and inflation and all the things that affect us that our provincial government can do something about. Who is going to do that job? Whether it's Doug or Bonnie or Merritt or whoever it is, but that's what the election issue should be about. I get the tariffs are going to affect our day-to-day as well, but let's talk about those over the next 29 days instead of just this, I'm the one that can beat Trump. Hey. It's 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedoruk, in for Mike Farwell. More in a moment. I'm Larry Fedoruk, in for Mike Farwell. I know one thing. Come the 27th of February, I can tell you this for sure. I am going to be voting. I haven't missed a voting in a municipal, provincial, or federal election that I can remember for decades. When I turned 18, I wasn't in a hurry to vote. Oh, they're all the same. They're no good. So, whatever. I don't know when I started voting, but it was sometimes in my 20s. And I voted, and I make it a point of it. And I get how it feels. This is something, as democracy is under attack worldwide. It's democracy, and especially liberal democracies, that have to do a better job of selling overall. I say selling, and I guess I mean it literally. Selling overall why this is important. And I don't think that I'm going to change anybody's mind. If you're not going to vote, you're not going to vote. But I feel like I should say it anyway, that if everybody voted, politics would look so different. It would be unbelievable. Even if 90% voted, if 95% voted, imagine if 100% voted. I'm not saying let's call for mandatory voting. I don't know how that would work. I'm not sure. I would be interested in various programs, like if you vote, you get a tax benefit, or, I would be interested in different ways of encouraging voting, have drive-through polling stations, whatever the ideas are to increase voter turnout. I would say, let's try it. Let's do it. But can you vote online? Well, we're a little worried about, we don't know yet if we can guarantee the security of that. But we should be, I'm hope somebody's on that case, working on that, so that I can just tap my phone and I've voted and it's secure and it's authentic. like I said, we can't do that yet. We can't guarantee that. But I hope somebody's working on that so that one day we could. Because I tell you, when everybody votes, it's going to be unbelievable. Then there is that, too, and I touched on it yesterday. It's kind of too late here in the day, I think, to open up a can of worms here, but reforming the voting system, I've been talking about that for my entire career in News Talk Radio, and it still hasn't changed. And I don't know that it's going to change ever. But democracy has got a big challenge in front of them to prove that, hey, 70, doing quick math in my head here, about 70 years of about 80, I guess, of post-World War II democracy, and a large part of it liberal democracy, finally under siege and worldwide. I mentioned that, 80-some countries had elections last year. Very few of them went small L liberal. The trend is the other way. And, in this country, for 70 years of the 20th century and about 12 of this century, I think 12 to 15 of this century, we've had a liberal democracy. And it's kind of defined Canada. And I get that maybe after all that time, people just want to change for the sake of change, but democracies have to do a better sell of, hey, this is why it's important, and this is how democracy works, and it's based on the premise that you vote. You all vote, not 44%, not 2/3, not everybody votes. So that's what I'll be doing on the 27th. The 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Want to hear from you when we return with more here on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
You talk back. You talk back. It's the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. We want your opinions, your thoughts, your rants, your raves, whatever you got on your mind. Let us know this hour. This is the hour for sure. I'm going to repeat the numbers one more time. 519-570-2545. You got your 1-800-570-5715 and your star 570 on your cell. Whether you want to talk about the provincial election or anything else, the Trump tariffs, what else, new jobs in Cambridge. There's that report that came out yesterday while we were on the air, the foreign interference report that said, really, there were some attempts at foreign interference, but I loved what the commissioner said there's no traitors. It's good news. Huh? No traitors in the federal members of parliament group. Okay, it's nice to know. But foreign interference, it's not just a federal problem. There could be attempts in our provincial election from foreign actors to try and influence the way we vote in a provincial election. I mean, if you're going to influence elections, you influence or you want to try, you would try at every level, not just federally, of course. So I'm not saying that's going to be a factor in the provincial election, but it's something we have to keep in mind, I would say, these days. Kicking off our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour, I'd like to see the familiar names here. Here's Andre. Andre, go ahead. You're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
I am a winner. Well, I got a couple things. Larry. Thinking about Mike, he's on the road. I hope he's having a safe trip. So I'm going to try and be fast because I got three. So one, you said earlier that you hope that there's more people voting. I used to vote, and I'm done voting because on the show and with some councils and all that, they even said that we need to listen more to the listeners. And I haven't seen that at all, especially from Doug Ford, with school, with medical, nurses, nothing, on my view. So that's my point. They don't listen, so why vote? They have their own mandate, and they move on. They do their thing. I don't vote for that. I vote for some change. Two, sorry, I had one that was very important. Oh, yeah. My goodness gracious. Larry, I feel good for people that do live in an apartment who has gas and hydro and all that stuff paid in their thing. But for people like me, like I told Mike last year for resolution, I said this year my resolution is it's going to get worse this year. You know, we're not at the tip of the iceberg, and this is why. My gas and hydro has almost, I should say, doubled. Not because of my use. We barely use water now. We got rid of our pool because of the inflation. My bill used to be $90 and went up to $172 just because of 3 times going up. My gas has went up double. So that's $300 a month. And now, like you were talking earlier with car insurance, my car insurance, we always pay by year because it's get rid of it and pay that credit card. That went up too. So everything is going up. So I'm really very afraid that they don't care about us. Now, when they say we need to try and look for the people, the homeless and all that stuff, Larry, well, how can you fix the top if the bottom keeps bleeding? How can we stop this bleeding? Like me, I got rent evicted from $1,200 to $2,500, and now it went up. Well, that's another thing that went up yesterday. My rent went up $75. So it's impossible. So what do I have to do? You know what I mean? It's impossible. But I know it's not just here. It's all over Canada. But to me, we have gas, we have hydro, and I don't understand why they're doing that to us. And that was my point. So, yeah, I really wish everybody to be kind to each other, to understand each other. And, you know, it's just a nonsense world right now. I'm not going to swear, so get your finger off, Devin. Love you truly. But, you know, I'm very happy to have this show for people to talk and to listen and to share their opinion. Have a safe day, Larry.
All right, Andre, thanks for your call. I would drop the old line on Andre where politicians do not talk to the people. They talk to the people who vote. That is a hard and fast old rule in politics. So it's the opposite. Why do I vote? They don't listen. They don't listen because you don't vote. And that's why politicians go to union meetings and they go to seniors groups and they go to because they know, certainly by statistics, here's a group of people who vote. So why am I talking to Andre? Why should I even care what Andre thinks? He's not voting. So I don't even need to be concerned about anything he says. That's not me saying it. That's maybe a politician saying that in the back of their brain. So you know what? We'll get Grant in before the break and others on hold. We'll get to you as well on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Here's Grant. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, they've said for this election it's expensive. So how is it expensive more than the other elections? And I mentioned this to Mike a while back with the Liberal Party, and I agree with Andre. They don't care. I have trouble getting out with my anxiety. I reached out to them. I left several messages. And I finally got in touch with a Liberal person because I wanted a fruit hamper. And I spoke to this chap, and I explained to them that the rise in prices are partly the Liberals' problem. And I asked for a fruit hamper. He would not do anything for me of that nature. Well, then, in my opinion, when someone has asked for it, you do it. And I don't care. he's a stuck-up. These liberal parties or these politicians, when someone reaches out to you for a serious thing like this, you reach out to them and you get them what they asked for. And I'm close to not voting again. If I'm asking for something, I want this done. If not, then they should not be elected at all. And there should be a stipulation. If you don't follow through with what we want, then you don't have that job.
Grant.
Yeah,
Grant, I don't disagree. Thanks for the call. Sorry, man, I got to move on here, but that, I touched on this yesterday. It doesn't matter if you're the counselor, if you're the regional counselor, if you're the MPP or you're the MP. You work for your local constituents. Now, if I call my MP about the stop sign on my street, I should expect an email back from the MP going, yeah, here's who you call. That's a city thing. Call so-and-so. At least it doesn't matter if you're federal, you work on a local level. That's our system. You work on a local level because that's where politics actually really works. And when you need something locally, like Grant or Andre and, hydro and provincial issues, and it's not coming back to you, I get it. Why do you want to vote and why do you care? But it's more the reason to vote, I think, and getting more people to vote. Terry, Kyle, if you don't mind holding, we'll get to you next here on 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedoruk, custodian of the Mike Farwell Show while Mike's away. Not the sole custodian, just your custodian today and this week. Mike's on the road with the Rangers. Don't forget, pregame 6:30 with Mike and Paul tonight. Kitchener Rangers visiting the Sioux Greyhounds. 12 o'clock Talkback Hour continues. Here's Kyle. Kyle, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you better now, Kyle.
Sorry, I'm just going through a little bit of a valley here, but I'll try to be quick. So I understand the whole rhetoric on the politics and what's going on. I think it would be a little bit of a different story, and this is not just within Canada, but I think this goes on with why, because a lot of us are focusing on right-wing politics now. But let's say we didn't dump all this money into other countries. Let's say the Liberal government, didn't turn down the oil going to Germany and Japan, and let's say they said, you know what, we'll send you oil for this cost. We're making trillions of dollars. Let's say instead of using the money towards Ukraine, we took that money and we put it within Canadian pockets. And if there's a surplus and we sent it out to other countries and we still covered our own people at the same time, I think that's where you'd see a shift. But the problem is, and this doesn't just go with Canada, but also goes with Europe, because Europe is actually focusing on right-wing as well. You look at Germany, you look at Hungary. I wouldn't put Serbia in there because they're going through a little bit of an issue right now. But you look at what's going on. I mean, 15, 20 years, or not 15 years ago, but maybe 10 years ago when they had the crisis of the refugee crisis thing going on and they let all those refugees in, which I understand is a bad thing. But now look what's happened. Now you have people fighting because they spent so much money on other countries and what's going on that they didn't really focus on themselves. And that is, I think, the biggest issue that we have in today's society is we focus so much on not what's going on within our own country, but other countries, and we lost it. And you look at what the Liberal government said, we didn't listen to Canadians. Well, of course you didn't listen to Canadians. Canadians have been screaming for however, and now you say, oh, we're going to go and turn around and we're going to listen to Canadians now. No, like that's the issue that we have. But, I vote every time there's an election, and, that's just the way it is Larry. But I just want to give just my 2 cents on that there. So I appreciate it, but I'm just before I let you go, I'm just like Andre and the other one there. I've moved to Listowel about 5 years ago. The first thing I did was I called my local MPPs and I asked them, hey, I'd like to, I think we were going through a provincial election at the time. I just said, hey, I just want to meet you. I'm new to the area. I want to get to know you, hear what your policies are. This is what I want to say. I never got anything back from any of them. So, I'm kind of the same way. Why should I vote for somebody if they're not going to put the effort into seeing somebody who's actually interested in their own policies? So there you go. Thanks, Larry. I appreciate it. Have a good day, my friend.
Thanks, Kyle. You too. Sorry you're going through a valley. Hope things pick up. I'm kidding. Being an ass, there's what I'm being. But I don't know that isolationism is a direction I think the world should be going in, and that's really what putting country first is about. What is us? What is Canada? What is France? I mean, United States and Canada are built on immigration, but when you get especially European countries where it's Italy, France, Germany having these right-wing surges, where what are us? Well, what is that? Isn't us this? We're used to being a mosaic or a melting pot or whatever we are. That's the world, man. That's what's happening, and the world takes care of the world. And I don't know that isolationism is I realize it's popular, but I don't know that it works. Terry, you've been holding. I appreciate it, man. Terry, go ahead.
Hey, hi, Larry. I talked to Mike a couple of days ago regarding Doug Ford. I think he's very popular still, 7 years down the road. I mean, he speaks the language of the common man, like the buck of beer, alcohol in corner stores. During the pandemic, he was kind of that calming influence when people were running around like chickens with its head cut off. So, and your guest was right. I mean, he's basically why not strike when the iron is hot? Because he knows there's a big hate on for Justin Trudeau right now and what the Liberals have done. And that's going to be his number one priority, is to attack the Liberals provincially, even though it's a different game, but still. Right. I saw an ad it's been on a lot, where he's sitting, it's probably taken out of context, but he's sitting down with Bonnie Crombie having tea. Like, who cares? They say, oh, see, she's a friend of Justin Trudeau. So that's going to be the main message. And before I go very quickly, Larry, I don't vote because I'm not a fan of the electoral system. That's why I don't like Justin Trudeau, because he lied right to our faces 9 years ago when he said that this was going to be, after he was elected, there was going to be no more first-past-the-post elections, and he lied to us. So I think that was cowardly and very punk-wise of him. So that's not the reason I don't vote. I just don't vote because our system is destined for this disaster that we end up with, where you got 35%, let's say, there has been governments in the past that have gotten 35% or 36% of the popular vote. They have 100% of the power. I don't think that's democracy. I think split the vote, whatever percentage you have, that's how many seats you get, and try to work with another party to get your agenda through. That's a real democracy. And I hope things change. I don't know if it's going to happen while I'm still alive, but that's what I'm aiming for, Larry. Have yourself a good day. Thank you.
You too, Terry. Thank you. And I have a point that I think kind of goes over your point of Justin Trudeau didn't follow up on changing the electoral system. And it's something he said on January 6th that I agree with. And but I've got to get traffic and weather on together here. But we'll get to that point after this short break here on 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. When you're the fill-in guy, you're allowed to make mistakes because they're just happy that somebody filled in, So mistakes, I went late a couple of segments here, so I have to go early here. And by early, I mean on time. So to get back on time, I'm going to save my little rant on why I'm going to defend Justin Trudeau on not changing the electoral system like he promised. And we're also going to get to Mary and Ernie and hopefully Sarah and Bob. If you all want to hold, the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour returns in a couple of minutes here on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
And let's get to more of your calls, your thoughts, your opinions on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. I'll save my opinion on the topic that I said I had some thoughts on, which is not changing the voting system like Justin Trudeau promised. I'll save that so that we can get to more of your calls, because really it's the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. It's you. Here's Mary. Mary, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Hi, Larry.
Hey, Mary.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I appreciate that you're filling in for Mike. I hate when they keep playing all those old ones over and over and over. You're a warm body and a live voice.
Well, a live voice. I know that I can say for sure.
Yeah. Well, I have a few opinions. I'm a political junkie and also a news junkie. I like to keep myself abreast of. Some people say, "Oh, don't even look at that stuff. It just makes you sick." But if I want to be an informed voter, then I have to see what's going on.
Good for you.
Well, yes, for sure. And I'm going to be 82. I'm no spring chicken. But ever since I have been able to vote, I have always voted, come hell or high water. Now,
good for you. Excellent.
Well, the whole thing, and I encourage my children to do so, because I think there's a bit of malaise in the younger people. They don't see it as much of a thing as, well, I don't know about you, Larry, but people fought and died for that right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do that, I think you're dissing on their grave.
Yeah.
They died to honor us behind them. So I always vote. This one now with Ford a bit perplexes me because I really didn't want an election. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll definitely listen. The other point was here, Larry, in Australia, you get a fine if you don't vote.
I knew they had changed something there. I wasn't sure. That's interesting.
No, that's been for a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. You don't vote, you got to pay. You pay a fine.
Oh.
Well, I mentioned that to Mike a number of times ago. Some people think that's not the right way to go. But if you know you're going to get fined, don't you think you'd start to listen more as to what's going on? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I would think, yeah.
Well, the other thing is, sure, have I been disappointed by elected officials? Of course. But that's not going to make me not vote. What would these people say if it was a dictator and you couldn't vote? I think we have to keep voting. That's my opinion. Okay, Larry?
Mary, I'm glad you said that, and I agree wholeheartedly. Thanks so much for the call. I am going to go to Ernie next. I'm not sure who was holding longer, but here we go. Ernie, go ahead. You're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Hey, Larry. I definitely agree with what Kyle had said there. A lot of the points are too, even though I still do continue to vote. But as far as it's almost like you're calling it extremism, right-wing wave. You're almost trying to put the scary thought on it. Look at this is too dangerous. What's happening all over the world? And I look at El Salvador. I feel that country is flourishing. There's a leader that came in and took care of the country, did what the people wanted to, listen to the people. Argentina, another leader. They have no debt now, extremely popular. Now, again, we can look to the U.S., and whether you agree with Trump or not, the number one mandate of the people was cost of living and immigration. He's taking care of those things. So this right-wing stuff that we all have to be scared of. And then we go to Canada here. Crime is up. Cost of living is up. We're flooding the country in with people. We're paying money everywhere else. All of a sudden now, because the carbon tax isn't popular, we're going to think of changing our mind and doing a huge flip-flop. And we're holding our residents here hostage by Canadians want an election here. Larry, you're pushing your agenda so hard. You don't even try to be in the middle. And that's where I'm asking, I don't know if you're able to do that. At least, Farwell kind of likes to play both sides. But we're not in a super dangerous.
Now, okay. This is terrible. Did you do that on purpose, Ernie? Did you cut yourself off to make it sound like I cut you off? Because I did not cut him off. The call just dropped out. You'll never believe me, will you? Okay, the call just dropped out. I do disagree wholeheartedly with what Ernie was saying, but it sounds like I cut him off now, but I did not. It just dropped. Bob, go ahead. Bob, you're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Hi, Larry.
Hey, Bob.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Well, I'm going to bash the Conservatives again, but I used to vote Conservative when they had a leader. They haven't had a leader since Joe Clark.
You weren't a Harper fan? I mean, he did govern for almost a decade or a little over, I think.
No, when Harper was in power, I used to vote ABS, like the braking system. Anybody but Steve.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And about the way we vote, Justin said he was going to bring that in, but the Conservatives weren't in favor of it because they were afraid no party would get a majority. So were they more concerned about the party or more concerned about the country?
All right. Bob, thanks for the call. That's exactly correct. And so what Justin Trudeau said, I'm paraphrasing, but this was even on January 6th when he took questions after he resigned. They said disappointments. He said, I didn't change the voting system like I promised. But what I thought, my logic in changing the voting system was it's not something that a government in power should do with their majority. It's got to be something that all government parties agree to. It's a major change in the system of Canada. It's almost, and he didn't say this part, I'm adding this part. It's like when if you're going into a world war or a big war and you're going to take your country into war, you have a war parliament. Elizabeth May pointed this out. You have a war cabinet, you have a war parliament. In other words, everybody has to get involved and agree, not just because we have a majority in parliament, or can we say, okay, this is the way it's going to be in Canada now. Because then you have to agree as all Canadians. So if this is true, and I think it is, the Liberal Party went to the Conservatives and the NDP and the Greens and everybody in the bloc and said, this is what we should move forward with, and they couldn't get a consensus on it. And for something as big as changing the voting system, you can't put that on one party or one guy. You have to say everybody had to agree, and they couldn't agree on changing the voting system. To my point, nobody will ever fully agree to change a voting system that got them in the first place. Because if the voting system changes, that means I may not get in. So I'm just going to keep it the way it is, status quo. And then again, therefore, it'll never change. The representative voting is sneaking into some areas like, leadership conventions and smaller elections and stuff. And that's what it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be those smaller kind of elections that see something different, and they're going to have to show us how they work, and then it'll get into bigger and bigger jurisdictions. That'll take years, if not decades, in my opinion. Back with more of your calls in a moment. 12 o'clock Talkback Hour here on 570 News Radio. And for Mike Farwell, I'm Larry Fedoruk, not pushing an agenda, certainly offering my opinion and not shy about it, but only to draw out your opinion. But an agenda? Gee, I don't think I have an agenda per se, at least not here for this. Rob, go ahead. Rob, you're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Hey, good afternoon, Larry.
Hey.
Listen, with the people, like a few opinions about how they're not voting. I think some of it's the big problem is them. Is the mess we're in today is from a lot of people not voting. Far greater people than us sacrificed for the right and privilege to vote. And you know what? I think when many don't vote, some of these politicians count on it. Because the mess we're in today is because a lot of people didn't pay attention and really investigate and research and vote. We've been hearing lately about how people have been saying our military's down. Well, how many on the talk shows over the last few years have you heard people call in and say, we want to see the military build up? They never have. Been very few. There was a distinguished guest on Mike Farwell's show on Monday that explained what he not only witnessed, but what he went through to see where democracy wasn't followed. And, no matter who we dislike or like, I admire for someone standing up to run for something they believe in. Because then there's somebody going to, it's their idea. And an old quote from Winston Churchill years ago saying, if you're in a leadership role, it's not the exact words, but if you're in a leadership role and you got people pissed off at you, good, because that means you're doing something good. Doug Ford was really worried about trying to improve all the voting in Ontario. Wouldn't he have been smarter instead of mailing out these $200 checks? If you show up at a polling booth and you vote, you get handed a check or you get it mailed put into your bank account. It would go through electronically. Wouldn't that?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the voter turnout then? Wouldn't that be something?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to think on that one a little bit, Rob. But I get your point.
Because he's going to count on. There was not an election really called for. Yes, we are in danger for these tariffs. We are in danger because bigger than that, anything else. Like you think of 500 million people, maybe at risk of losing their jobs, maybe more. Not only you think of losing their jobs, but they're going to be losing homes. Like homes, because a lot of people are stretched. Homes, cars, it can affect a lot. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's going to even put uncertainty of investing around here. And it affects everybody. Like there's nobody away from this. So if he is truthful on that, I don't think it was really necessary. But who knows? He's been on an agenda for this before, and he's cost us a lot of money. The health care he's never has got, resurrected and supposedly made better. But I guess the big thing on his mind was getting booze in Zehrs and getting it in different corner stores and breaking the contract instead of being patient and waiting for one year. It's just, anyway, back to the voting. It's a responsibility to even encourage the young people and newer people to vote, but to research, not just say, I like the guy by his hair color or by the red rose on his lapel, but research who you think would do the job for you best in your local area. And
I would agree, Rob. I'm gonna stop there only because I got a lot of callers here and I'm gonna run out of time soon. But I appreciate the sentiment, and if the lesson there, if the only thing we take from that is get out and vote, then that is good. Here's James. James, first time caller. James, go ahead, James.
Hi, can you hear me, Larry?
I can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Hey, yeah, for sure. I just want to quickly say, definitely politicians need to listen a lot more, or at least give the appearance that they listen a lot more, because it seems that they are clearly out of touch to some degrees, maybe many. There have been times when I have not voted in the past, but the truth I think about it is that we do need to vote if we want our voices heard on the record, and we can't just be silent objectors expecting a change. And I think maybe the politicians are appealing more to people's emotions rather than the logic of reasons of things, because in some cases just turns into a fighting match that's like a WWE special. But maybe in the future they can make it easier for people to vote, to have the access better for everybody, old, young, and all over the place. But definitely we need to be voting to make sure that we have it on record that we disagreed or agreed. And that maybe we need to change the way we do our voting ballots, maybe.
Yeah, I think we do. James, well said, sir. Thanks for the call. I know we got to go to break here. I'll get Mike in before the break. Here, Mike, go ahead. You're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Yes, Larry. I'm in favor of a mixed proportional system. I'm not in favor of a full-blown proportional representation system, because all you have to do is look at Europe, Israel, and a whole bunch of other places where this exists, and extremist parties wag the dog by their small numbers. What I am in favor for is a ranked ballot system where you get to choose a second choice, and people can rank their ballots where they say, okay, I voted for Liberals, but I'm going to vote for the NDP instead because my candidate didn't make it. That, I think, is an effective way to address some of the first past the post shortcomings. On the other side of the fence, I think maybe 20% of the seats should be allocated for proportional representation, and that should be so that smaller parties like the Green Party can get in more members, et cetera, and so forth. But I'm more in favor of mixed proportional, Larry.
Wow. Thanks for the call, Mike. That's interesting. The way you put ranked with the mixed. I never thought of that one. That's good. That's good. This is 570 News Radio. We'll be back in a moment. Larry Fedorik in for Mike Farwell. It is the time of the show when I fill in for Mike, where I shamelessly plug my podcast. If you're like most people saying, boy, I just can't get enough of Larry, well, you can visit my podcast YouTube page or find my podcast called Later That Same Life on any platform, almost any platform where you find your podcasts. I'm there. My latest one is about water, vis-a-vis fighting fires with water. So check that out wherever you find your podcast. And I want to end the show today where I began the show today, simply by saying Kang Hei Fat Choi. Happy New Year. Today is the beginning of the Chinese New Year, the lunisolar New Year, as it's also called. And it is the year of the snake, which is representative of the search for wealth, wisdom, and happiness through love, which I wish for all of you, but especially for me. So we'll be back tomorrow, filling in for Mike Farwell here on 570 News Radio. Talk soon.